All right, today we are diving into what might be one of the most important management essays ever written, Peter Drucker's Managing Oneself. Seriously, this is a game-changing guide to basically becoming the CEO of your own life and career. So let's get into it.
Drucker kicks things off by putting us in some pretty legendary company, right? He's saying that what made these giants of history so incredible wasn't just their raw talent. It was their uncanny ability to manage themselves. And his whole point is that in today's world, that skill isn't just for geniuses anymore. Nope, it's essential for every single one of us.
And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Our work lives are now stretching for half a century. We can't just wing it anymore. We absolutely have to be deliberate about how we grow, where we put our energy, and how we keep that fire lit for the long haul. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the big idea, becoming the CEO of you. This is really the fundamental mindset shift that Drucker wants us to make. It's time to stop thinking like an employee and start acting like the chief executive officer of your own life.
Think about it. For most of human history, your path was pretty much laid out for you. You were born into a job, or you joined a big company that mapped out your entire career ladder. The organizations were the permanent thing, and you were just passing through. Well, today, that whole model has been completely flipped on its head. You have choices, you can move around, and chances are you are going to outlive any single company you work for.
So here's the bottom line. You are in charge now. And with all that amazing new freedom comes a ton of new responsibility. It's up to you to carve out your own place in the world, to know when it's time to pivot, and to keep yourself sharp and productive. Nobody else is going to do that for you.
To be a good CEO, you've got to know the company you're running inside and out. And that brings us to Section 2, Know Your Operating System. This is where we get into the nitty-gritty, the practical tools for deeply, truly understanding yourself. Now, this seems like the most obvious starting point in the world, right? But here's the kicker, and this is classic Drucker. Most of us are actually wrong about what we're really good at. We might know our weaknesses, but even then, we're not as accurate as we think. And the simple truth is, you can only perform from your strengths.
So how in the world do you figure out your true strengths? Drucker gives us this incredibly powerful, time-tested tool called feedback analysis. And get this isn't some new-age self-help fad. It's a technique that was developed way back in the 14th century. Figures like John Calvin used it to build world-changing institutions. It sounds so simple, but believe me, it is ridiculously effective.
Okay, here's how it works. Anytime you make a key decision or take on a big project, you write down what you expect is going to happen. Then, and this is the important part, you put it away and forget about it for about a year. When the time is up, you pull out that note and compare what you thought would happen with what actually happened. The patterns that pop out will be your roadmap.
And the results you get from this are, well, they're eye-opening. This isn't just about getting a pat on the back for what you're good at. It shows you what's holding you back, things like intellectual arrogance or just plain bad habits. It shows you the areas where you are genuinely incompetent and should just stop wasting your time. It can even point out a simple lack of manners, which Drucker calls the lubricating oil of an organization. It's a full, honest-to-goodness diagnostic.
Okay, next, Drucker says you have to know how you perform. And the story about two U.S. presidents illustrates it perfectly. As a general, Dwight Eisenhower was amazing with the press because his aides gave him the questions in writing beforehand. He was a reader. But as president, he followed two listeners, Roosevelt and Truman, and tried to do press conferences on the fly. He was a disaster. On the flip side, Lyndon Johnson was a brilliant listener who partly derailed his own presidency because he kept Kennedy's staff of writers, and he could never really process what they were telling him in their memos. Knowing your style is that critical.
So the final piece of your operating system is your values. And for the big ethical questions, Drucker suggests a really simple mirror test. It all comes down to this one question. He tells a story about an ambassador who resigned his post rather than do something shady, saying, "I refuse to see a pimp in the mirror in the morning." That's the test. It's that simple.
But beyond personal ethics, your values have to line up with the values of the organization you're in. When there's a clash, it just leads to frustration and you can't perform at your best. I mean, if you're a person who believes in promoting from within, but your company always hires big shots from the outside, or if you value long-term growth, but you're in a place that's obsessed with short-term results, you're just not going to thrive.
So you've done the internal work. You're starting to understand your personal operating system. Now what? Well, you've got to put that knowledge to work. And that brings us to Section 3, Find Your Place. This is all about taking that self-knowledge and figuring out where you belong, where you can make a real difference.
This is the question that unlocks everything. Drucker says that successful careers aren't really planned out step by step. They happen when people are prepared for opportunities because they've done this deep work. It allows you to say yes to the right things and, just as critically, to say no to the wrong ones.
Now, your contribution can't just be about doing what you love. It has to connect to reality. So first, you look at the situation and figure out what it actually needs. Then, you ask yourself, given my unique combination of strengths and my personal style, how can I make the greatest possible impact here? And finally, you have to define clear, tangible results that will actually move the needle, preferably within about 18 months.
All right, so you know yourself and you found your place to contribute. That brings us to our final section, number 4, mastering relationships and time. These are the last two pieces of the puzzle, and they're all about how you work effectively with others and manage your career for the long, long run.
Look, very few of us achieve anything truly significant all by ourselves. Being effective always depends on other people. This means you have a responsibility, first, to understand how your boss, your colleagues, and the people who work for you operate. Are they readers or listeners? What are their strengths? And second, you have a duty to clearly communicate how you work best.
And this leads us to Drucker's definition of trust, which is just brilliant. He argues that in the modern world, trust isn't about liking each other or being friends. It's about understanding each other. When you take responsibility for making sure people understand how you work, and you take the time to understand them, you build trust. And that trust is the absolute bedrock of any effective team or organization.
And this brings us to the final, really crucial challenge Drucker lays out. With a 50-year career, you might hit your peak at age 45 with 2 full decades of work still ahead of you. And for knowledge workers, the danger isn't that you'll get physically worn out, it's that you'll get bored. Managing yourself means having a plan for this second act. Drucker outlines 3 really clear paths forward. 1. You can start a completely new second career. 2. You can develop a parallel career. Maybe you keep your main job but also run a nonprofit on the side. Or 3, if you've been very successful, you can become a social entrepreneur, dedicating serious time and money to a cause you're passionate about.
But here's the catch, and it's a really big one. You can't just wake up one day at 55 and decide to do one of these things. The prerequisite, the absolute requirement, is that you start building that second interest early. Drucker is very clear on this. If you don't start exploring that second passion before you're 40, you probably never will. It's that second interest that gives you options and makes you resilient when things get tough in your main career.
And so, that's where we land. The challenge of managing yourself is really the challenge of thinking and acting like a chief executive. Drucker called it a revolution in human affairs, and it demands that we take total ownership of our work and our lives. So the final question isn't for me, it's for you. As the CEO of your career, what will be your greatest contribution?